Hi everyone and welcome to One Autistic Person. The video I'm going to do today is going to be really different to what I've done before. It's a video that I've been sort of saying that I'm going to be doing for a while, and this first section here is just for One Autistic Person, for the channel One Autistic Person, and then it will cut into a video that I'm going to be using as a promotional tool for what I'm discussing in this video today. But I just wanted to sort of clarify that this is what I'm doing. So it's going to look slightly different when it goes into well, I'm not going to look any different, but the video will be slightly different. Basically what it is that I have worked in the charity sector for many years. I've worked in varying different roles, but for the last sort of 15 years I have very much been in either middle or senior management roles, which have included recruitment, which has included line management of large numbers of people quite often in a regionally dispersed area. And I can manage up to hundreds of people, and if you include volunteers in that, potentially thousands. And I noticed that policy writing wasn't really suited for people who are neurodivergent, but also that just expectations and processes and working hours and flexibility and those type of things that are just built into how the working world is generally really difficult for people in general. I don't think this is just going to help people who are neurodivergent, and that isn't my plan. I'm going to refer to two different types of neurodevelopment within this. Well, I'm really not actually. I'm going to talk about, so I'll explain what I mean by this. What I'm going to do is, so I need to clarify the language that I'll be using. If I say the word neurodivergent, I mean somebody who is autistic, somebody who has ADHD, somebody who has dyspraxia, somebody who's dyslexic, somebody who has a neurodevelopmental condition, which means that their neuropathways work differently to what would be considered the typical. Neurotypical is people who that would be classed as somebody who had the typical brain or the perceived typical brain. And if I talk about neurodiversity, I am specifically talking about all people, how everybody's brain works differently. And what I want is to have an organisation that truly looks at neurodiversity as part of its recruitment, as part of its part of the way that it manages people. And I also want to make sure that everybody's well-being is as well looked after as possible, without having to lose out on things like money, not going to be treated badly at the beginning of a time of working somewhere. And I'll get into that in the video that I'm going to do, because that's going to go through the steps of what I want to do with the charity. So there's 8 main goals that the charity is going to have, and then there is how I would expect employment to look. So one of the complications that you have with any charity is the fact that you aren't really able to take big risks. And one of those things is salary. Salary is really difficult to get above or beyond a certain level in charity, because it's looked at as, is this reasonable for the charity sector? And it's meaning that salaries are kept quite low. For instance, shop managers are generally on around about £25,000 as an average amount for doing 35 hours worth of work. And it really, it's a lot less than what I think you should be paid. So I'm looking at that as a pay structure, and the way that I'm going to do things is I'm going to set up a charity that will specifically look at research in relation to social aspects of neurodivergency, not necessarily in an overly scientific way, but more in a way of looking at how do we feel. This is all going to be about personal experience and trying to individualize as much as possible where it is possible. And it's also going to look at building communities and building spaces that are neurodiverse friendly. So not necessarily just neurodivergent friendly, but just are easier for everybody to navigate, because a lot of things that people who are neurodivergent struggle with are also things that people who are neurotypical struggle with. It's just to what level, and actually would everybody be better off if we sort of started thinking about things from that perspective. And I'll get into what the charity goals are when I speak about the charity, but that's the main point of what I want to do, and working with organisations to be as neurodiverse as possible, to understand neurodivergency and understand the benefits of having a neurodiverse workforce, and also how can your development side of things, how can that be more positive, and doing advocacy in relation to people understanding neurodivergency as a concept. So, but what I want it to be is led, the charity side of it, to be led predominantly by people who are neurodivergent, because one of the problems I see with the whole situation with neurodivergency at the moment is it's looked at from the outside, and what I want to do is have it so that there are a mix of neurodivergent and neurotypical people, but with at least 50% of people within the charity being neurodiverse, and the same with the separate business that I'm going to have. So I'm going to run a business separate to the charity. But what will happen is the business will be running. I'm not going to get into the complexities of the legalities of this. I've had to really look into it. But what I want is for the charity to take as little risk as possible. But I want a business that's able to take the risks, that will actually be able to push us forward with things like salary costs, as we'll come to at the end of the video when I get to the end of the next part of the video. So I'm over explaining, no surprise there, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get into the actual video that I'm going to be using as a promotional video. So this is going to have a slightly different tone to it. I say that, but it's me. It probably isn't going to have a different tone to it. But this bit isn't going to be going out as a promotional video for funding and things like that. But what I'm just about to do, maybe it depends on how it goes. I might actually just leave it and come back to it, and I might have to do it differently. We'll see. So let's see. So I'll disappear and then I'll come back, and that'll be when we will be going into me explaining about what I am planning on doing. Hello everyone, my name's Jason. I'm setting up a charity and a business, so I'm setting up two different structures so that I can have a charity that focuses on the development of understanding of neurodivergency within the workplace, within education, within learning institutes across the board, so that we can have a much more neurodiverse friendly working environment. And so I'm setting a charity up that will spend its money on doing that. I have over 20 years experience within the charity industry, and I've worked at varying different levels, and I've worked at senior levels where I have got a lot of understanding of the way that charities work, and it has a plethora of potential jobs that would really be suitable for so many different types of people. And it's extremely creative and can have a lot of autonomy. Unfortunately, it can get bogged down with a lot of things like not having enough staff and that type of thing, and also salaries are usually terrible when it comes to charity. So what I want to do is also have a business that works to exactly the same ethos, but is able to take risks because it's able to look at its income and be able to say we can use this to be able to further develop things, which can be problematic within charity settings, because rightly so, charities shouldn't take risks with the money that they have. So I know these struggles. I've struggled with this throughout my career, where we've had to have understaffed departments because of the fact we've had to work on a skeleton staff. People aren't paid very highly, and there's a lot of expectation of work. So I want to change that and have a charity that spends money, but it isn't focused necessarily on the day-to-day making of money, and have a business that works both with the charity that I'm creating and hopefully with other charities, so that it can have a more neurodiverse workforce. So I should have started really by saying, I am autistic, so therefore I can sometimes be prone to talking a lot, especially when I'm passionate about something, and I can quite often tangent and monologue into places that you might not expect me to. But please bear with me, it will be worth it in the end. So that's the way I see the structure. Is it'll be two totally separate entities. One that is profit making, but donates its income, donates an amount of 80% of its income. I want it to go to charity. Not its income, sorry, its profit. So 80% of its profit goes to charity, whether that is the charity that I'm setting up or it's other charities, and it will be spread across it. But the idea of the business is it works to the same ethos as the charity that I'm setting up, which is to have a neurodiverse workforce with at least 50% of the with at least 50% of its workforce being neurodivergent in some way. Neurodivergency for me covers a very large number of conditions that are developmental, and it can be different for different people. I'm going to be putting a link to my website at the bottom of this video, and in that video it will explain to you what I would put down as seeing 50% of people that are neurodivergent. I'm going to refer heavily in this to autism, because I think that that's something that's easily translatable into understanding things. So the charity that I'm creating will be called Living Reasons, and the business that I'm going to be creating will just be called Reasons. So they interact with each other. The branding is very, very similar. It will be slightly different to what you see in the corner. The Living Reasons, this is what the branding is going to be, but the Reasons bit is going to be slightly different, which I'm still working through. So from the perspective of the charity structure, I'm just going to first of all look at what the charity trustee board is going to look like. So if we now have a look at what I'm going to do in relation to the charity trustees. So any charity has to have a minimum of 3 trustees. This is to ensure that there is that there's different thought processes, that it's not just one person. They have to be unrelated, those 3 people. In any way. The maximum that a charity can have without having agreement from the Charity Commission is 12. I personally feel that having 12 is a really good thing for us to start with, or at least try to. So what my plan is to start with 3 trustees and move on from the 3 trustees to get 12, and that I would like there to be a full board of 12 at all times, with having specific roles. So I believe that to make the charity work correctly, we would need an operational trustee, a financial trustee, a creative trustee, which would include events, which I will get onto later on in this video, an outreach trustee, which would include social media, a health trustee, an education trustee, a volunteering trustee, so somebody who oversaw the volunteering side of the charity, a people, HR and training and development person, a person who looks at services, so that would be all of the services in relation to how the charity operates, so that would look at utility bills, that type of thing, anything that was going to cost the charity money that we purchased externally. Legal, which is always really important to have a legal trustee that understands different types of legal expectations of a charity. Research, which is going to be really important for Living Reasons, and an income generation trustee, so somebody who looks at fundraising and all ways of being able to make money. And they will run the charity. I want the charity to be ran by trustees and volunteers, because I think that we can do that, because I want the business to run the operational side where it would cost money to run, and it be that the charity is just having the money coming into it through various different means, and is able to spend it on the things that it needs to spend its money on. So with that said, there are 8 reasons why I want to create Living Reasons. So I'm going to go through those reasons now. So reason 1. So reason 1 is creating employment opportunities through traditional charity operations, including volunteer management, support work, financial operations, human resources, training and development, retail and trading, fundraising, marketing and events. Additionally, funding commercial business projects in various sectors that promote and develop people who are neurodivergent, and promotes true neurodiversity in all operations and trading activity. So what I mean by this, so with charity, as I've said, I've had 20 years experience in it. There are so many different jobs that you can have, that you can make your own. And what I want is for that to be something that's opened up to people in a way that's accessible to them, and where there is an active promotion of trying to make a neurodiverse workforce, having people who are neurodivergent and people who are neurotypical. So you have people who are autistic, they have ADHD, they have dyspraxia, they have dyscalculia, they have I don't know whether I said dyslexia or dyspraxia, but dyspraxia, OCD. Various different divergences from what would be seen as the typical, but also making sure that we have a group of people who are also neurotypical. So this is why I want it to be a 50% workforce of what would be considered neurodivergent people, which probably constitutes about 50% of the population in reality when you put everything together, and 50% of people who there's no identification there. The big thing that I want to make clear on this is that this does not require somebody to have a diagnosis. It's just self-identification is just as valid. Understanding that my brain works differently to the way that other people's might do is something that would be part of what I would want to make sure that we look at when we're actually recruiting people, and that we are making sure that everybody's welfare is taken account of. And that's the big part of this, is that it's making sure that everybody's welfare is taken care of from every different angle as much as possible. And I'll get onto that more as we go into to the more operational side of things later. So that's my first reason. So reason number 2. So my second reason for starting Living Reasons is to give people recruitment and employment support who would consider themselves neurodivergent or have learning difficulties and related conditions within existing organisations. So this is working with people who either want to go through a recruitment process with support and understanding, and we would have a team of people that would work on that, or people who already work in an organisation and are just looking for more support on understanding the complexities of a work environment, and also to supply comprehensive training and understanding to employers regarding neurodivergent workers, including policy writing and management, day-to-day management, and reasonable adjustment support. So what I've seen is that policies are quite often written in a way that are very much towards the neurotypical. The same with day-to-day management, whether that's day-to-day development, progression within a job role, looking at how somebody experiences the work environment, and also reasonable adjustments seem to be something that people struggle with quite a lot. And sometimes the way it's put forward can sound like you're asking for a lot, and in reality that might not be the case. It might just be wording, and it's just that I'd like to have an element of support for people who are already working within organisations, but also to work with employers to ensure that that's taken into consideration as part of the reasonable adjustment requests that people have. So that's reason 2. Let's have a look at reason 3. So the third reason that I want to set up Living Reasons is to signpost to and supply mental health, lifestyle and general support for day-to-day living for people who are neurodivergent. And what I mean by this is that as most people will know who know me, that mental health has been a big part of how I have struggled through being neurodivergent. There are many people who are neurodivergent who also have comorbid mental health conditions, and counselling is very much not set up. Again, it's the way the world is. The way the world is set up is for neurotypical people, so counselling therefore is focused towards how neurotypical brains work. I want to have a counselling department within Living Reasons that works specifically with counselling for people who are neurodivergent. I also feel that would be helpful to have that option. It's not that you have to be neurodivergent to be able to have the counselling. It's just counselling in a different way. I actually have a counselling qualification myself, and I would like to put that into practice a little bit more, but work with people who've got a lot more experience in that area to look at how we do this on for people on a day-to-day basis, and just people feeling they've got general support of somewhere to go if they're just not understanding why the world is the way it is, or they're getting something's happening to them and they don't know how to deal with it. Just sometimes being able to talk to somebody else who has potentially gone through that can really be helpful, and that's what I want to be able to do with this reason. Now I'm going to have a look at reason 4. So the fourth reason that I wanted to create Living Reasons comes very much from a fact that it's very difficult for neurodivergent people quite often to really push themselves to be able to get through the complexities of things like learning and development. It can sometimes be overwhelming, and people can sometimes struggle to get through it. So what I wanted to do was to create a space where people can have training, personal development and confidence building within a neurodivergent community or a neurodiverse community, to increase employability and sustainable employment and learning opportunities. So what is it that is needed for us to be able to get to the places where we all know as neurodivergent people that a neurodivergent person can get to, but what are the barriers that are stopping that from happening, especially around employment, because as I'll get onto at the end of this video, I'll be looking at some numbers, but I will say this, that only 21.7% of people, I haven't got the number in front of me at the moment, I'm pretty sure it's 21.7% of people who are autistic are employed. So that leaves 88.3% of people who are autistic are not employed, which is concerning, and there has to be reasons for that. And when you look at people finishing learning opportunities, the same sort of figures look to be similar. So this is about creating a space where people know that they can come to for support in relation to how to get through that, and looking at confidence building in the fact that quite often we are struggling to get through life because we don't feel confident in being able to put ourselves forward, and I really want to make sure that people feel that way. So let's have a look at reason 5. So the 5th reason that I wanted to set up Living Reasons comes from a very personal perspective, but also from speaking to other people who are neurodivergent, helping my best friend trying to get through some things at the moment, and also in his working life previously. And what I've noticed in general, it can be problematic. And that is support in relation to communication with public services for in a neurodiverse way. So for people who are neurodivergent and people who also are neurotypical but struggle to get through these situations. So what I'm talking about here are things like the healthcare service. So in the UK, that's the National Healthcare Service, job centres, benefits, and legal systems. You are much more likely to not have a positive outcome from a legal situation as a neurodivergent person. The NHS is extremely problematic to get through, and it can feel like you're treading through treacle, and it makes it very, very difficult. Job centres don't necessarily understand. They either overcompensate for you to a point of not being helpful, or they don't help at all and make it much more difficult. The benefit system in the UK is definitely set up to make it very difficult for people, and I understand the need to do that, but it's how to negotiate that and how to navigate through it is extremely difficult if you haven't got somebody to help you with it. And for instance, a lot of people who claim personal independent payment or try to claim personal independent payment who are neurodivergent fail. It's quite a high number that fail. To say how many people apply, it's one of the most applied for reasons. And actually, they might be able to get those benefits, but they're not. But it's because of the fact we're really often not great at being able to explain to a neurotypical person how our day-to-day affects us, and also sometimes we really struggle to understand how it is truly affecting us as well. So this is the whole point. The whole point of this is to make sure that those things are able to be navigated and get better outcomes. And in the long run, when it comes to things like the NHS and the legal system, that actually, if something was sorted much earlier, then it would be much less cost to that external business. External business? No, sorry. There you go. There's my neurodivergency. Public office organisations. So let's have a look at the 6th reason. So the 6th reason that I wanted to create Living Reasons comes from the fact that I've kind of mentioned it already, but the fact that a lot of solutions that come in relation to integration into society for people who are neurodivergent come from the neurotypical world. So it's that it comes from people looking inwards on it and not truly understanding it. So what I want to do is to develop a neurodivergent and neurodivergent friendly community, which is neurodiverse, so has all neurotypes in there, to ensure support in the community from people who understand the needs of the community. So what I want to do is, whenever something is going to be changed within the charity or in the business, or if we want to try and make change overarchingly anywhere that we're looking at it from a neurodiverse perspective, but also that it is predominantly led by people who are neurodivergent, talking about their lived experience, because I think that gets lost quite often with, well, neurotypical people expect you to live this way, and this is the way society is, so you've got to fit within that. And I think there is a middle ground where there is an element of fitting in. There always is going to be. Social situations are like that, but what I think can happen is that can be done in a different way, and with understanding everybody's needs, rather than just going, you need to change and there's no change that needs to happen anywhere else, or it's getting an oversight of everything rather than it being looked at that you just need to change, just mask and that'll be it. A lot of this comes from the fact that masking has been so dangerous to me, and it's something that I'm really going to push within the organisation, is to say, yes, you will need to mask at times, even within a place that is neurodivergent friendly and is extremely neurodiverse. You are still going to have to mask at times, but what I don't want is people masking on a day-to-day basis all the time in every interaction that they do, because it might make somebody feel uncomfortable. I want everybody to feel comfortable to be the person that they are, as much as is possible, without it having a detrimental impact on other people. So let's have a look at the seventh reason. So the seventh reason that I wanted to create living reasons is advocacy. So advocating for people who have neurodevelopmental conditions and learning difficulties within all areas of day-to-day living, predominantly led by neurodivergent people and people with learning difficulties, ensuring that all solutions are right for the people affected by those conditions. So again, this comes back down to, quite often the solutions that are put in place don't actually include it as part of the conversation, and we don't have a predominant voice. We're still often pushed into saying, well, you've still got to do this. It's like, well, can we find other solutions? I think the only way to find those solutions is that having advocacy being predominantly led in an organisation by people who are neurodivergent is the only way you can say you are actually accounting for that, and saying this is what we actually need, and where can we make compromise, where can we compromise, what will we compromise on, what won't we compromise on. That needs to come from us. We don't need to be told what we have to compromise on. It needs to come from what we feel is something we're able to compromise. And then we've got the final reason, which is reason number 8. So the 8th reason and final reason that I want to set up living reasons is to supply services and commercial outlets that are neurodivergent friendly and that are neurodiverse friendly, catering for all neurodiversity through research and user-led environment planning, adaptations and adjustments. So what this means is that so I'm going to have within the business that will be running things on behalf of the charity. They will be operating charity shops, for instance. What they will be is as neurodiverse friendly as possible, and it's ensuring that everybody has accessibility to them and that those experiences are positive for everybody. But what I also want is to have, as well as charity shops, I also want to have cafes and restaurants, and eventually that's where I want it to be, where it is employing people who are potentially neurodivergent and having a neurodiverse workforce, but also that the experience that you have there is easily adaptable to account for everybody's needs, and to make it so that it is absolutely the norm for those things to happen for the person. That's an extremely complex one, and it's a long-term plan part of things, because obviously at first it's going to be all about making sure that the charity is operational, and then after that we will look at other things. I will point out that, again, any profits that are made above that, so 80% of the profits that are made from that business will go to charity, regardless of what the operation is for the charity, for the business. Which is another reason why I want the separate things, because a business can operate in it however it wants to. A charity needs to operate at all times for the good of the charity, which can be really complicated, whereas a business can do what it wants as long as it meets its legal requirements. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a look. So that's what the charity goals are. Now I'm going to look more now at how the business is going to look, and where I feel like there are some really quick wins in being able to make this sustainable. And I have done all of the number crunching, and I know that this is possible. And it may seem like it's not when I'm talking through it, but it is definitely 100% possible, and making quite a considerable amount of money for the charity in the end as well. So let's have a look at how the business will run. So this is what is called Reasons. The charity is called Living Reasons. The business is called Reasons Trading. So what I'm going to look at predominantly here, there are many other things that will be attached to this, but for me, this is a main point of this. And this is where I believe this really will help for all of neurodiversity, not just neurodivergent people. I believe that this is a good way to look at employment and to ensure that everybody's welfare is taken into account, right from just how we write contracts, how we work, that type of thing. So the first thing is that currently a normal full-time working week is 5 days and between 35 and 40 hours. Now, I want to cut that to be 28 hours. The maximum that somebody works is 28 hours a week over 4 days. So 7 days a week over 4 days. And the problem that comes with this is often if you want to condense down into 4 days, which I've done in my job currently, I'm working 35 hours over 4 days, which is meaning that I'm basically doing 10-hour days rather than it being that I've reduced. And if I reduced, I'd have to take a pay cut. Now, I'm okay with taking that pay cut. That doesn't matter to me. But for many people, it really is a problem because of the fact that our living wage in this country it seems like a lot, and also putting it up is actually problematic in some ways economically, and there are loads of problematic areas with it. But I want it written into policy that Reasons will always pay a minimum of £5 per hour over the current living wage, with a minimum of £20 per hour as standard. So what this means, so currently our living wage in the UK, which is basically the minimum that can be paid, is £11.44. So what I'm saying is that my minimum for working, if you are working in a contract in Reasons, the company Reasons Trading, that your minimum amount, the minimum amount for, let's say, a sales assistant in a shop would be £20 per hour. And if the minimum wage, at some point the minimum living wage will get to, let's say, £15 and a penny, the minimum we would pay would be £20 and a penny, and so on. It would always be at least £5 over that minimum wage amount, that living wage amount. Also, 5% standard pension contribution, regardless of whether you make a contribution. We will make a contribution for you. We will contribute into a private pension that you want us to, rather than one that we say you have to pay into. But also having an external financial advisor that you can go to, that the organisation will be part of, to look at future planning and what pensions actually mean, because they're extremely complicated. And many of us, it wasn't until about 3 years ago that somebody turned around to me and said, "What are you doing with your pension?" And I just said, "I'm paying X amount into it." And they were like, but you're only, I was 35 at the time, so you're only 35, you should be putting it into a higher risk side of things, so that you've, at the moment, you should be doing that because you've not got a huge amount of time left. That's not the case. And I now understand it a lot more, but I know people just pay into the pension and think, oh, that's it, it'll be fine. And actually, you could be making much more out of it. I can't give you that advice. I got the advice from somebody who was actually a registered financial advisor. It was actually the finance person in the organisation that I worked for. But I realised that so many people are not having that advice. Nobody gets that from the business that they work with. And it's that is an option for people if they want to. And it's external from the organisation. And like I say, everybody gets 5% on everything they earn, regardless of anything else. They get that 5%. Obviously, people can choose not to take it if they really don't want it, but it is a standard. Even if you don't make a contribution, then we won't. And I've looked into it legally, because technically you should have to give 3% in, but you don't actually have to. It's a rule, not a law. So yeah, everybody will get a 5% of their salary through that. 6 weeks annual leave. So that is 6 weeks bookable annual leave. And that does not include bank holidays, because I do not want the organisation to open bank holidays. It also won't operate on Sundays, so it'll be a 6-day operation. Closed over the Christmas period with no one working, unless there was later on we may need to do that, but it would be an agreement that that's what would happen. But it would be that person would be recruited specifically to work over and know that they were working over that period. But as it stands right at the beginning, that from the 23rd until the 23rd of December to the 2nd of January, that people just get that off, and it's that there is no additional to your actual annual leave. You have the 6 weeks, and that is additional to it, and you just don't need to worry about it. For just because days, because of the fact that there are days where you just get up and you don't have to take it for sickness, you just want to say, I can't do it today. And as long as there is ways of being able to cover that, which I will make sure that there is people, the way the contracts will work will mean that there will always be enough cover. And then also having your birthday off, or if you choose to work it, that you'll get paid double time. So basically being given a gift for the fact of saying thank you for working on your birthday. If you do, you get paid double time, or you can have it off. Or an additional day off if you wanted to have an additional day off. And the other bit is flexible work planning depending on circumstances, and easily changeable temporary flexible work changes that are accessible to all. So what I want is for people to just be able to have conversations, not go through a formal process to ask whether something can change. Is it possible? Let's just look at it. Yes, it's possible. We'll change that temporarily for, let's say you needed to do something for 4 weeks because of the fact that something was happening in your life. Then we'd be able to have a look at that. And we can also look at long-term things as well. And so not necessarily just going, this is a contract, this is what you're going to do, and we're not going to look at it. Anybody can have that. It doesn't relate to anything in particular. And then finally on this bit, really, I am going to go into what salaries look like in relation to living wages in a minute. But one of the things that really is my bugbear is that a person's probationary period is seen as this time where you're expected to have this huge amount of output. And yes, you might get development, and you will get, I think quite often it's surface level. It's not great. And certainly in the charity sector, there are a lot of complications there, again, from not enough staffing. But what I wanted to look at, rather than going, right, your first 6 months, you show us everything and you're great, and you get to the end of that. And quite often what happens is you're burnt out by the time you get to the end of the 6 months, and you're absolutely knackered, and you don't want to carry on with the job because it's too much for you. What I want to do is reverse the whole situation and have a very clear 2-year start plan of where you're coming into the organisation. So your first 6 months will be seen as a settling in period. And what I mean by that is it's the organisation getting to know you, you getting to know the organisation, you getting to know your job, but there aren't huge amounts of expectations on you. And the only thing that you would be dismissed for in that situation, potentially the only thing that would lead to disciplinary, would be if it's a serious gross misconduct issue. So something that was illegal, something that you'd done that was really, really bad, and would be considered gross misconduct. That's the only thing that would be potentially going to go down that route. What I would see it as is that first 6 months is actually the allowance of being able to get to understand things and understand how things work, and not being pushed to do it really quickly. I feel there should then be a further 6 months worth of personal development, which works on what skills you understand you've got, where you're seeing within the organisation that you need more development. You work with your line manager and the training person to ensure that those skills where you need to focus on those, you work on that as a personal development over the next 6 months. And then a further 12 months of which is making the role yours. And this is really important for me, is that I think every role can be slightly adapted, can be changed slightly, and there's a lot of learning that an organisation can do from employing somebody, as well as somebody realising that they want to do things in a certain way, and being able to make the role and them as a person, as an individual person, not an employee, as a human being, being able to go, right, where can this role be suited to the way that I work, the way that I am, the way that I think, the way that I want. It's merging those roles together so it becomes one for you. And that would be your first 2 years, and that would be seen as a whole development period of getting to the point of being able to do your job really, really well, work within the organisation, understand everything that's going on with it, and then you would go into the next stage, which I believe everybody should be looking at. Will be looking at one of three things: either remaining in their role but becoming more efficient within it, or they're doing something within it that's making them progress within their role, because you can progress within a role and not have to change role. Or you might want to progress in the organisation, and you might want to look at a promotion perspective. You might want to move sideways to something that that somebody else is doing on that appear to you, but it's different to your role. So if you're in a management role, you might just want to work in a management role within a different department. Or you might want to work somewhere else. You actually might want to do that. And I think accepting the fact that people have jobs sometimes, but they are going to move on to do something. So if you're training to be a nurse, or you're training to do something specific that you want to do, there's transferable skills that you can learn. So how do we look at that going, right, we know that this person's going to leave in 2 years' time, because that's their plan after this 2-year period, let's say, or let's say even in 12 months. How can we make it as enjoyable for them as possible while they work while they work with us? What skills can we ensure they gain so they can then move on to do what they want to do in the end? Because people leave jobs, people move on, they want to go and do something different. We should celebrate that with the person, and if that person decides that they want to come back, then it's open to it, and it doesn't make it feel like it was this awkward situation. So celebrating the fact that we all, again, are diverse and therefore might want to move on. And I think that's really positive. So from a salary perspective, I just wanted to kind of point out that somebody was on what would be classed as our minimum wage, which would be £20 an hour. If they did 21 hours, they would earn £21,840. If somebody worked 35 hours, at the living wage, so 14 more hours, 2 full days on the contract if it was 7 hours a day, which is kind of where the full-time equivalent of 35 hours comes from, they would earn 20,835, I think it is. So it's slightly over £1,000 less for working 14 hours more. And that's the point that I wanted to make. A 28-hour contract would be £29,120. If somebody was working 35 hours, like I say, they would be earning 20,800-ish. So you're looking at about 8,500-ish more just for working 4 days rather than working 5. And like I say, I've done the financials of this. It works. You will have a much happier workforce as well. So I'm going to have a look at something now which I think is problematic for charities and why I think that they have issues with this, and it's events. So events within charities have become stagnated recently, and it's something that's been really problematic for charities. And for me, the reason why is because of that risk side of things that I've said about charities. And with my plan, you'll have a business that will be able to run events, but that money will go to that charity. And the problem is that I don't feel that people are able to be creative because they're worried about taking that risk. They're going to type as well. They're going back to, we've done an abseil, we've done all of these things before. So do things that people want to pay for, not things that are out of the box of what they are or what they would usually do. Actually, what do people already pay for? Let's just off the top of my head, let's say an escape room situation. Do an escape room event, and people will be willing to raise money and be part of that to do it. And I feel like we should be taking inspiration as events coordinators to look at what the entertainment industry is doing and making sure that that's what you're doing as events. And I think, again, like I say, they're stuck very much in that. And that sort of thought process of, this is what we've always done, we'll do it, and it made money before, and we've got to a point where it's not really making money anymore. And the big thing for me is looking at options to increase income through using online platforms to further monetize fundraising, so it is more focused on the enjoyment that people have of the event rather than looking at making money. Now, if we can make it so that an event makes money outside of the money that's generated, we can focus more on the enjoyment of the event rather than the massive focus on raising money, because we're living in a time where that's extremely difficult for us. So if there are other ways of us being able to do it, great way of being able to do it. And like I say, having it as a business doing it, they can take the risks, because if it doesn't make money, it's on the business that they did that. It's not made the charity make a loss, therefore it's not a problem. So I just wanted to sort of point that out from an events perspective, because I think it's somewhere that, as within my plans of the organisation, this is somewhere where we can really, really push things. And I think this is where there'll be a big group of people that can work from all neurodiversity on this, because of the fact that it is creative. It's going to include video editing, it's going to include recording, it's going to include planning, it's going to include budgeting, it's going to include promotion and marketing, and it's a huge part of what I want to do as events. So I just wanted to point that out as a point. So I kind of just wanted to go on my beliefs and ethos, and the reason why I set this up in the first place. So these are my beliefs and ethos. So in relation to employment and people working in an organisation, there are some points that I feel are really important from a beliefs and ethos situation. And for me, it's pay more. I think that pay is seen as this thing that we try to keep down as much as possible. And actually, it's probably the biggest resource an organisation has to ensure loyalty to the organisation, but also getting people to actually work for you and feeling happy and have good welfare. Work less hours or less often. Better focus on outcome rather than time, because what I feel is really problematic, and from a legal perspective, it is extremely complex to do anything other than saying you work X amount of hours for X amount of pay. It's so complicated to do anything outside of that from an employment contract, because it's seen that the more time you spend doing something, the more effective that is going to be. And that I want that to be less of a focus. So working less hours, like I say, the 28 hours it would be classed as full time. Staffing correctly for the task, so ensuring that you know that tasks are going to be done within a role, making sure that there are enough people to carry it out with a little bit extra to make sure that nobody's feeling overwhelmed. Develop and invest time in people. I think this is something that a lot of organisations feel that they do, but don't do very well. And they don't mean to do it, it's just because they don't have enough time. And especially, again, I can only really talk from the charity sector. I have worked in other sectors for short periods of time, but mainly I see it from the charity sector, but I hear it a lot from a lot of people saying that everybody that is understaffed and overworked, and I think that leads to not really truly investing in people. I think it's important to make employment personal, but understand it as a job. So understanding the fact that that person is a human being doing a job, that they are not just a set of expectations on a job description, but understanding to them as well that it should be a job. That is what you should be coming to work to make money to live. But to enjoy your life as well, but also knowing that person enough and what they want you to know about them, that you can then make it so that it's as personal as possible for them. Because if you feel like the organisation takes care of you and thinks about you, then it's not seen as this big entity that means nothing. It's actually seen as that your job is enjoyable and that you're going into a place that actually values you as a human being. I think it's really important when you're communicating with anything in relation to employment is that you listen, respond, negotiate, and agree. So you listen to what a person needs. You respond to it in an honest way, saying, "I can look at that now, I can look at that now and we can deal with it." Or I'm going to have to go away and look at it because I don't know the answer. Be honest. You may have to come into a negotiation. So if it was working hours, that there might be that we can go down to 21, but we can't go down to as low as 7 or whatever it is that it is, and agree with each other that this is what's going to happen. A big one for me is care, because I feel like people do care. I feel like that people actually do care about people, but it's really difficult when you're acting within policy to care. So what I want to do is make sure that the policy in itself that I write is caring, that it has caring about other people as part of the process of that. And I've kind of touched on this already, but it's that having a basic understanding that a person is either happy in their role, in the current role they are doing, or wants to progress or move on to something else. The plan should always be, if possible, that person does that within that organisation. So if you can get somebody to progress into a role that's more suited to them and something they want to do within your organisation, that's perfect. But it's also understanding the fact that sometimes that is not possible. Helping them with the skills to do what they want through their current role or further training will help them be happier and ultimately more effective in their role. And the role that they hold, and you can celebrate their success when they do move on, because you'll be celebrating it if you've done it with them. And who knows, during that time period, you might be able to create a department that actually suits that job, and it could be looking at it going, actually, we could do this as an organisation, not creating a role as such for a person, but it's like looking at what does this person want to do, and could we actually, as a business, create something that does give them that role, but actually would be beneficial to the organisation. And I think it's really important to look at transferable skills, that quite often you learn a lot of skills in a role that can be used elsewhere. go back to the nurse example that I kind of touched on previously, working in customer service or hospitality has a lot of areas where it can really help you in time management, in the way that you deal with face to face with customers. You were going to have to do the same thing with patients, and you can learn a lot about how to be a nurse through working in a restaurant, for instance, and understanding that, and getting the person that's in that role to understand that that's what they're doing. They're learning these skills that would be really helpful for them, and that they can then use to get the job role that they want to in the future. And like I say, you can then celebrate those successes with them. So finally, I'm just going to have a look at a few numbers that kind of go into, like I said at the beginning, this is looking specifically at autistic people. And this is where I have gone into a deep dive. I've definitely gone into an autistic rabbit hole of research here. So around 21.7% of autistic people in the UK are unemployed. And that is lower than most other groups of disabled people. So there are 37.5 million people who are classed as working age, and around 2% of which are likely to be autistic, which leaves 750,000. 162,750 are employed, which leaves 587,250 people who are unemployed, which is astronomical. It's a huge number. If we say, and this is a low number in my view, a very low number, if we say that 20% would be likely to be capable of holding a traditional role, but with accommodations, or cannot due to the current working conditions, that's 117,450 people that I'm not saying that my organisation would be able to employ. I am fully aware of the fact that that is a huge number of people, and there's no way that I would ever be able to employ that number of people. But what I would like is to, wherever possible, help other organisations to gainfully employ people who are autistic, and do it in a way that it keeps those people in employment in a way that makes their welfare the centre of what's happening, and making sure that they can carry their job out and they're not going to end up jumping from job to job, because this happens a lot for people who are employed. So they're not accounted for in these numbers that I'm talking here. A lot of autistic people will either stay in a job and be very, very happy with it, or will have to jump around because of the fact that it's too difficult for them to be able to complete that job role. So from my experience, obviously that's coming from an experience of me, somebody who has jumped around when it's got too difficult for me. And I've also seen a lot of people that are autistic that have ended up leaving a job because it was too stressful for them. As somebody who I either line managed, or somebody that was within the organisation, and I could see that that's why they ended up coming into that situation, that they ended up it being too stressful for them because of the way that it is currently set up. So I am really going to pull this apart from a governmental perspective, because I think that the government should be doing what I'm doing. And if each one of those people claimed universal credit and were able to stop doing so, which they would be able to do because of the salaries that we would be looking at, would mean that pretty much everybody would no longer need universal credit, which is £395 a month as standard. That's your basic, so I'm just going on basic. That would save the government £46,392,750 per month, which equates to £556,713 per year. £713,000 per year, sorry, so £556,713,000 per year. And you can double that if you then say that each one of those people gets a housing element of universal credit, which would be £1.1 billion. And that then doesn't account for the tax that person's paying and all of the other, and national insurance. It doesn't account for all of those. So my point here is if this was accounted for more, and we were able to get more people who are autistic into a work environment that was safe for them to be in, then actually it would have a huge impact financially, beneficially to the overall society. My point here is not anything to do with benefits or anything else. It is to make the point that pushing us out of those equations by sort of hankering down on making employment harder for us to be part of is not beneficial to society at all. And this is where there is the problematic side of people not seeing the fact that we can contribute greatly to society. And that is what I want to do. It's the whole point that I want to set this organisation up. It's the whole reason why I want to set the charity up, so that we can do the research and to help people who need that help, but also make a business that is actually very much around ensuring neurodiversity, and that everybody is catered for within the working environment, and everybody is paid what I consider a more than fair wage for the job that they do. So that's my plans. I am in the stages of recruiting trustees at the moment for the charity. So anybody who's interested in that, just go onto the website, which is in the description of this video, and just let me know what you think you could bring to the organisation and which trustee role you would suit. So thank you very much, and I really hope to, in a year's time, this to be set up and we'll be ready to become operational. I want to do this before I'm 40. I want it to be, which is in 2 years' time. Well, it's less than 2 years now. So within 2 years, I want it to be fully set up and operational, and I really truly believe we will be there. Thank you very much. Bye.